Let's call to order the Committee on Professional Conduct. We want to establish our quorum. Ms. Park, could you?
Sunny Youngstown Park.
Jose Campos.
George Familette.
Michael Savoy.
Mark Silverman.
Dan Jacobson.
Sochi Leon.
Okay, we have a quorum. Just as a reminder, you may notice that certain committee members may be referencing tablets during the meeting. The tablets allow the members to easily access some of the meeting materials during the meetings and are not being used to discuss, deliberate, or otherwise take action with any items that are on the or within the board's jurisdiction. So with that, our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the Committee on Professional Conduct from our meeting on September 14th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Any comments from the members? Any public comments? Okay, let's call for a vote.
George Familette.
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
Dan Jacobson.
Yes.
Sochi Leon.
Abstain.
Sunny Youngstown Park.
Abstain, I was absent.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
And Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Okay. Great. That motion passes. The next item 2 on our agenda, we wanted to have a discussion regarding whether to allow CE or continuing education credit for licensees serving on the California Board of Accountancy or its advisory committees. To discuss this matter, Gina Sanchez is going to provide comments. Gina?
Thank you. Good morning. This agenda item, as Mr. Familette said, is to provide an opportunity for the CPC to discuss allowing continuing education or CE for licensees serving on the CBA or its advisory committees. The CBA has determined that the prevailing consideration in determining whether CE is acceptable is that it must be a formal program of learning that contributes directly to the professional competence of a licensee in public practice. The attachments to this agenda item are the relevant CBA regulations regarding acceptable CE credit, specifically sections 88, programs which qualify, 88.1, provider requirements, and 88.2, program measurements. Staff have included in this agenda item information regarding the main activities of the CBA, the Qualifications Committee, or as we say QC, the Enforcement Advisory Committee, as we say EAC, or the Peer Review Oversight Committee, or PROC, in order to assist with its discussion. Additionally, staff researched 15 other Department of Consumer Affairs boards and did not find any regulations allowing CE credit for their board or committee members. Although staff do not have a recommendation on this item, if the CBA supports a proposal to allow serving on the CBA or its advisory committees to qualify as acceptable CE, the CBA may want to direct staff to explore a regulatory change outlining specific requirements for CE credit. That concludes my presentation. I would like to now turn it back over to the chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the members?
How did this come up for consideration?
It was at the request of a member that we added to the agenda.
The September meeting.
My personal view is no. I mean, we've deliberated on other kinds of experiences that may or may not qualify as CE. The whole reason we have or find members to serve on these committees is because they've established qualifications as a CPA or in the case of the CBA, we got other qualifications, but for the committees, that's all I think a prerequisite to being on that committee, and maintaining that qualification is highly important. So I'd be opposed to changing that for purposes of allocating CE on that basis.
Okay. Come. Yes.
I concur. The governing of of the accounting profession is not the practice of the accounting profession, and it's not the in-class or the continuing education. It's not an equivalency, and therefore I think it's problematic. I also think that it might be problematic in that it may be seen by, it may be perceived as self-serving, and that could be a problem. And the further problem is when people who are in some other activity and they've requested that be considered continuing education, and we'd say no, our argument, I think, is weakened.
Okay. Any other comments? At this point, I don't think we have any action steps. Should this issue, we've had this issue come up in a number of contexts previously. I think we'll keep it on that list to be considered should we take the matter more broadly up again in the future. But at this point, there doesn't seem to be any motion or action steps.
Well, would you like to vote to decline to make the recommendation?
I don't know that we need to,
Yeah.
but I don't know if there's any public comment on the particular topic.
Unless, comments from the public? Okay. I think we're good. So item 3 on the agenda is the discussion and possible action to make non-substantive changes to forms incorporated by reference in Title 16 of the California Code of Regulations, as noted, in order to update the California Board of Accountancy's mailing address. And that kind of interpreting that is there have been certain regulations where address and other administrative items were incorporated in the regulations, and they need to be updated. With that, Mr. Bone was going to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. As indicated by the chair, the purpose of this item is to provide the CBA an opportunity to consider taking action on a handful of regulations and forms that are incorporated therein, as indicated in the agenda item, to update the CBA's current mailing address. The attachments provided in this agenda item contain the proposed regulatory language and changes to the forms that are incorporated by reference in the CBA's regulations. Those forms will also receive a revised version date. The changes are not substantive, but they are necessary to update our mailing address due to our move earlier this year. Because these changes are non-substantive, staff plan to use an expedited rulemaking process, which is known as a Section 100 change. Prior to the CBA's move earlier this year, every form and related document was updated with a new CBA letterhead, which contains our current address. Every form since the move has always had the current address. As the letterhead is not a part of the form that's contained within the regulations, staff were able to make that change rather quickly. But the proposal before you today is necessary because in a handful of our forms, the CBA's past address is included within the body of the form itself. Because of that placement of the address on those forms, this regulatory change as outlined is necessary, and thus CBA approval is required. If the CBA supports the proposed regulatory change and regulatory language and form changes as indicated in the attachments, staff recommend the following motion: to approve the regulatory text and forms in CBA regulation sections 9.1, 12, 12.1, 12.5, 15.1, 16, 19, 20, 43, 45, and 87.9, and authorize the executive officer to initiate the formal rulemaking process for a Section 100 change, including submitting the text and form changes to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, submit the Section 100 change to the Office of Administrative Law. If the Office of Administrative Law does not approve the Section 100 change, direct staff to submit the text and form changes to the Director of DCA and agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the Executive Officer to make any non-substantive changes to the package, take all steps necessary to initiate the regular rulemaking process, and set the matter for hearing. This concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back to you.
Would any member like to make a motion?
I move to adopt the recommendation that was just read and consistent with page 2 of the memo item 3.
I second.
Second, okay. Any comments from members, other members? Okay. Any public comment? Call for vote?
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Sunny Youngsun Park,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
And George Family.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Okay, next item on the agenda is public comment. I would like to make a brief comment on that. In order to allow the CBA sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business, public comment will be limited to 5 minutes. Please make your comments focused and relevant to the duties of the CBA. It is not necessary to repeat statements or views of previous speakers. It is sufficient to state you agree. Written statements should be summarized and submitted to the CBA. They should not be read. Staying on topic, also, the board values the input as part of its consumer protection mission. It invites and welcomes public comment during this section of the agenda. However, board members cannot engage in dialogue with those who testify during this section of the agenda due to the constraints imposed by the CBA and its members by law. The law prohibits the CBA from substantially discussing or voting on any matter brought up during the public comment. A member of the public who would like the CBA to discuss a general topic not related to a specific case involving one of its licensees can ask the board members to consider placing the issue on the board's agenda for a future meeting. If you have an application or disciplinary charges pending before the CBA, we ask that you do not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint, since the board members will be the judges and by law are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record in the case. With that, do we have any member or comments from the members of the public? Okay. No comments noted. Last item on the agenda, agenda items for the next meeting. Okay, then we are adjourned.